Hi, I'm Tristan, one half of façon with Charles Blanc. On the event of Earth Day 2021, I'd like to share with you a bit of an insight into the role I think artists and art can play in addressing some of the biggest questions and challenges we face as a society. It's not new for artists to work in this way. Artists have been working outside galleries for as long as they've been artists. But I'd like to share a few sort of seminal works, things I think are really important. Agnes Dean in New York in the 1980s did a project called Wheat Field, and she planted an entire wheat field on some of the most valuable real estate in the world, right next to the World Trade Center. And she farmed it, she milled it and created the flour, and it really brought into question what are our priorities and where do our values lie as a society? Is it in commodity, in real estate, or is it in food production and the environment? Or Merle Lederman Hercules, who realized a project called Touch Sanitation. Again, this was in New York in the 1980s, and she went around the city and shook the hands of over 8,500 sanitation workers, really acknowledging and thanking the unseen people who keep our cities moving on a daily basis. Katie Patterson in Oslo, Norway, with Future Library. This is the planting of a forest and commissioning of a story by a writer every year for 100 years, which is kept unopened in an Oslo library until the forest is felled and the full 100 stories are published. So, a commissioning of a stories that's only available for future generations, really thinking forward. Or Buster Simpson, hurling huge discs of limestone into the Hudson River to de-acidify the polluted waters. So these projects are poignant and poetic and I think really quite beautiful. And they've ultimately proved really influential in how we think and how we act. In 2009, I was fortunate to be part of Watershed Plus, an Alberta project, which engaged artists to apply these very qualities to the issues of our watershed. So I've seen over an 8-year period firsthand the kind of catalytic influence that artists can have, given the agency and invitation to be critical thinkers and to work in complement and collaboration with other subject matter experts, scientists, engineers, landscape architects, or strategists, all ultimately with the goal of connecting us to some of these bigger questions and involving us in what it means and why we do these things, how we manage our environment. So I'd like to share a couple of examples with you of what happened through Watershed Plus. But first, just a little bit about Calgary's watershed. The story of our watershed starts at the Bow Glacier, several hundred kilometers outside the city. And the water runs through the Bow River and Elbow River into the heart of our city. And it's what we draw our drinking water from, and it's what we put our cleaned sanitation water back into for communities downstream. The watershed is the entire catchment of where, when the rainwater falls, which flow into the tributaries and into the river that make its way through our city. And as Albertans, Canadians, we're very good at understanding our relationship to water. When we're in the wilderness, we're very responsible about those precious water resources. But when they enter a city, we often are somewhat removed. It becomes a utility by and large. And that's partly because it's hidden most of the time. That is, unless some of it breaks and we start to see a crack in the system. So in Calgary, we have a reservoir, we have lift stations and pump stations, we've got stormwater ponds, and we have 12,000 kilometers of underground pipes, both sanitary, drinking water and stormwater, that are operating continuously to make it possible for us to live in a city. And so Watershed Plus was the idea of bringing artists into this organization, embedding them in the work on a daily basis with other subject matter experts, those engineers, the strategists, the one building the infrastructure, and the ones operating it, the field service crews. So we worked within the Strategic Services Department to look at opportunities where artists could be most influential or useful in collaboration with those experts. One example is the fire hydrant drinking fountains. The idea of bringing drinking fountains into the public realm attached to fire hydrants. And they were arranged in different ways to sort of gather people in different means and replace the need for drinking water bottles, so that drinking water is available throughout the city of Calgary throughout the summer months at different events, festivals, and just placed around the city. They would move. So this idea of almost like an artist language, an installation language, but really creating a utility and a function that's available to all. And then also an initiative called the Dynamic Environment Labs, which invited 5 artists to research and work with experts over a long period of time to look at some of the important questions about our environment, the changing nature of it, whether that's floods or fires or droughts. And these artists, Tim Knowles, Peter von Tiesenhausen, Becky Shaw, Steve Gersh and Stokely Tolles, worked with experts exploring and understanding the full context of the watershed, all the different systems and how we relate to it. They went deep into the underground, they went inside the reservoir walls, they went into hidden reservoirs underneath our communities to really get a sense of how we think and relate to those things, or how invisible many of them are. And as a result, the outcome of those artists' work were installations, performances, events, exhibitions, a whole host of different ways in which it draws people to those questions and explores new meaning in them. One of the really unique and really valuable things to those artists is they could work hand in hand with people in the laboratories or the managers of the department or the fabrication suite to really bring together a cohort of people to address and work with really important topics and issues. Another example would be Dale Hodges Park. Dale Hodges Park was a project I was deeply involved in. It took a former gravel pit in the city that had been closed off to the public for 10 years. And the intention was a collaboration between public art, parks and water to look at the potential to turn this former gravel pit into a public park and also a stormwater facility, one of the utilities. It was taking the water, the stormwater, from 7 communities in the city and drawing it through 2 major pipes to the site. These pipes are enormous. They carry water that lands in an area equivalent to 11,500 ice hockey rinks. And at its peak can carry something like 100 washing machines of water, or the size of an entire washing machine, every second. So this would previously be invisible underground, and what we wanted to do was bring it to the surface, daylight the system, and intrigue people about the processes it takes to clean that water. At the same time, instead of water or stormwater just being a problem or a question, what do we do with it, was really to allow that water to be an opportunity. Could that water create habitat for other bird species and plants and animals? So again, it was collaborating as a multidisciplinary team, and in this case, led by an artist, following an artist's process from the outset to completion, thinking about what is probably one of the largest public artworks in North America. The outcome is the marrying of utility and function, infrastructure, as well as creating a park for everybody, and a public artwork which takes you on a narrative through the site. So the whole park itself is a public artwork. So for me, I think what's really important, or what I'm really excited about as an artist and as a citizen of Alberta, is what might be possible if this way of working became more common practice. If we embrace broader insights and broader expertise in addressing some of these bigger questions, and what might ultimately be possible if we think about things slightly differently, drawing in that different knowledge. Thank you very much for having me. Happy Earth Day, and goodbye.